Welcome, welcome, my noble thespians and my happy troupe of theater trolls. I'm your host, Dawn Westbrook, the biggest troll of them all, with my glass of Chardonnay. I hope you'll join me with a glass of something. And for the next few minutes, we're going to focus on the craft of acting, the art of directing, and embracing the process of this crazy career in the theater. I have some wonderful interviews lined up in the coming weeks, and this week is no exception. But first, this week's podcast is being brought to you by the Martha Hill Newell Playwrights Fund, whose commitment is to both local and national playwrights, and holds the belief that the relevance and vitality of American theater depends on the continual infusion of new works. Jon, here we are finally after a week of trying to do this and to connect.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It was crazy.
It was truly crazy. It proves how great technology is in 2020.
Yeah, how great and also how horrible. It did the same thing for me with you that it did with me in week 2 with Michael. In the middle of trying to get this together, it decided it was going to update as I was trying to create another Zoom meeting with you. And it kind of delayed me. It was horrible, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, the files were not corrupt. We are here together to talk about directing, the art of direction. And first of all, darling, what are we drinking? We know what I have.
I am drinking one of my favorite things.
What is that?
This is sugar-free Snapple cranberry raspberry.
Oh my goodness.
Hard to find, actually. It's a little hard to find.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you buy it in bulk?
I when I see it and it's on sale, then I'll get like 4 or 5, 8 packs.
Right. Well, cheers to you, darling. Here we are. Cheers. A little virtual cheers.
Yeah. Oh.
Here we go. Take a little sippy.
It's very good. Goodness. And it probably mixes well with other things. So
you know what? I was going to say a little gin would get that right up on its feet. So we have only met one other time, I think, after a show you directed, Stupid Effing Bird.
I think so. And I actually think I also came to a Christmas party at your house.
Oh, you know what? I bet you did.
But there were a million people there and you were, having a fabulous time. Yeah. So.
Well, we probably were having a wonderful time, and I'm glad you got to come.
Oh, it was wonderful. And it was a really nice party, and your house is beautiful. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And right now, as I said, my husband is redoing our bathroom. So if we hear sawing in the background or a scream like I've lost a finger, that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, he's a doctor by day and a remodeler by night. Craziness. So, Jon, pronounce your full name for me, please, so I know I'm saying it correctly.
It's, Jon, and then Kretzu. So it's exactly the way it looks.
Kretzu.
Yeah. And people have a hard time with it, and I can never understand why, because it looks just,
You know what? It is phonetically exactly written the way it would sound. Now, Jon is spelled with an O, not with an H.
That's right.
Jon, okay. And I have looked at some of the work that you sent me, some articles I've watched and some videos, I've read, videos I have watched. And I'm just fascinated with talking to you. You're actually the only, Michael Mastro is a director, but mostly an actor. Lucian, I spoke with.
Is a director, yeah.
Yes, and so, but you really are like a director's director, you know what I mean? You're not like those of us that dabble in both sides, acting and directing. You don't really act. Mostly you are a director and a journalist, correct?
Yeah. I acted back in high school and college, and never wanted to do it.
And I'm good. I'm done. I'll stay like a good poker hand.
Yeah, it was not my thing.
Well, you kind of know when it is, and you kind of know when it's not. So do what you're good at. It's like they tell playwrights, write what you know.
Exactly.
Right? Direct what you know. Let's talk about, I have some really fun questions I want to ask you specifically, but let's talk about just a little bit about your background and how you came to be in this career. I know that at age 4, you went out like a rocket and never came back in the arts. So tell people a little bit about your background with your parents and all of that.
Well, I was a single and only child, and my parents took me to the opera when I was 4 years old to see Madame Butterfly. There in Los Angeles, where I grew up at the Music Center. And I just fell in love with it. I mean, I literally, it's the first thing I remember. And I remember clearly the curtain going up and the light pouring out from under the curtain and the set And I remember thinking to my little 4-year-old self, I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to
Really?
do that. Yeah, that was I read that. I didn't know what it was that I was
Uh-huh.
going to make happen, but I knew I was going to do that, and it became an obsession. I spent a lot of time reading plays when I was young. I learned how to read really young. My mother taught me when I
You're an
was
only child, right?
yeah, yeah, and she taught me how to read when I was 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And so I went to the library and took out a lot of books, and I used to love to read plays because there was no boring parts. It was all it was all dialogue.
Isn't that interesting?
So, I was totally into that. And I remember getting a paperback copy of 4 Shakespeare tragedies, which I still have, at the supermarket one day in one of those, it was in one of those,
Yes. Turnstiles.
carousel, yeah.
Yes, the
And
carousel.
I loved it because it had drawings, and the drawings are really cool. And the plays were so full of, violence and fighting and murders, and, it was really dramatic stuff. And I thought it was great. I had no idea who Shakespeare was. That it was,
Unbelievable.
I just knew that it was short scenes with a lot of violence and a lot of yelling,
And a lot of words.
a lot of words, which I like to read out loud. And I would do plays for myself. I used to play in the backyard and in my room reading plays out loud.
Wow. Well, did you see out loud, speaking of out loud, Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen doing the sonnets? Have you seen that? It's
No, I
on
haven't.
Facebook. For anybody who hasn't,
Oh, I've got to.
Patrick Stewart just sitting in his house, and I don't know who's recording him,
Yeah.
but he's sitting there, and to hear him read a sonnet is just like butter. It's like butter. It rolls
Yeah.
off the tongue. And Ian McKellen recorded one for him for his birthday, his 80th birthday. And actually, on the day that he was reading the 80th sonnet, number
That's
80.
so great.
And he said, so it was
Oh,
meant to be that he do it. So I just thought that was really cool.
I
But
have to look that up. Yeah.
I can't believe you started. I still read. Well, I say I try to read Shakespeare. I always have to read a synopsis first.
Sure.
And I directed the complete works of William Shakespeare,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was with Charlotte Shakespeare for 2 summers, and I toured with them. I did As You Like It, and I did As You Like It and Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was fun. But the worst review I ever got. You always go, I'll
Yeah.
never forget this as long as I live. And
Yeah.
I got a review, and I didn't really know exactly what it was, but I had been directed to play Hermia as like a child, like a tantrum, like a little puppy.
Right.
And they said, and I quote, Dawn Westbrook speaks Shakespeare phonetically, turning poetry into pablum.
Oh.
Yeah, right. So that made me never want to do it again.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, really? Because I was actually pretty good, and it was really a neat show.
Sure.
But I thought, okay. And I studied at the Royal National, and I went,
Right.
I'll just stick with what I know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I never really wanted to do it again. And now people know, if you listen to this, that I speak, Shakespeare phonetically, which is not what you want.
No. But I think so much of my love for it was because I didn't know it was good for me. I didn't know it was like the greatest classic, the greatest thing ever. I was just a kid who was like into it because it was pretty, exciting and violent.
Do you remember you and that violence?
Yeah,
Do you remember what 4 tragedies were in there?
Yes, it was Hamlet, Julius Caesar, which I didn't like then and I still don't.
Okay.
The Scottish play, which I refuse to say, but that one.
Okay.
Mac and
And I'll say the second part, Beth.
thank you. His sister Beth. God,
Was it Titus? Titus is the
oh, and I love that. That's the one I've always wanted to do. No, it probably was King Lear.
one, Richard III, King Lear. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It was one of those. It was one of
Wow.
those plays.
Well, that's fantastic.
Oh no, Romeo and Juliet. It was Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, that is a little sad and a lot of death.
Lots of death. And Hamlet, Ghost, first scene, Ghost.
Oh,
Come
I
on,
know.
Cool.
I got to direct the complete works of William Shakespeare. Have you ever gotten a chance to do that?
I saw your production. It was hysterical. It was really funny.
Oh, Jackie stage managed. It
Yeah,
was, I thought it was so funny.
it was funny.
I had the best guys in Richmond. It was
Yeah,
David
yeah,
Bridgewater, Mike
right,
Todaro, Richard Cook, and
right.
John Glenn, of course, was at the Barksdale at that time. May he rest in peace. And it was just one of the funniest experiences of my life. I was thinking about that yesterday.
Great show.
Opening night, they, had that. I basically just wanted to give them a structure and then just let them go. I
Yeah,
needed
yeah,
them to just jump in the pool every night, feed off the audience, feed off each other, and just, throw each other off if they could
of course.
within means, right?
Yeah,
So you live up in the Pacific Northwest. Right
yeah,
now, you're in California. Is that correct? That's not
yeah.
Northwest.
I live in Portland, Oregon,
Beautiful.
and I've also lived in Seattle, and I grew up in Los Angeles. And right now I'm in Northern California in a lovely little city town called El Sobrante, visiting
Oh,
friends. I'm not going anywhere near the city. I'm not going anywhere near public transportation.
yeah,
I'm
no.
being very careful. But it's
Right.
just nice to kind of get out, see some people. I had not been in a room with a friend since March. I saw one person for an hour and one other person for an hour in Portland. That was it.
See, that's crazy. And I
It was
think
crazy.
I was listening to a podcast today and they were talking theater. It's Rusty Wilson from Richmond, Lane Satterfield and Rusty. Rusty was talking about, how I think people are kind of, or the podcast, one of them were talking about it, that theater people are really missing the intimacy
Oh,
of
sure.
each other, of being together,
Yeah.
the social aspect, and yet the intimacy of doing a play together, creating a piece. And just really, I was doing kind of okay. I'm kind of an introvert. And so, believe it or not, I really am. I'm a homebody.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was kind of liking being at home for the first few months.
Me
And then
too.
just about last week, it started to get to me. And it just, yeah, Nick Codaro, his passing, I
Yes.
think, kind of
Yeah.
really did a number on me, as it did many, many people.
Of course.
But it just started to get to me like, when are we really going to be able to get to do this again? And I can't
Yes.
visualize it. Can you?
I can't. Sadly, I really can't. I think it's the last thing that's going to come back,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in New York and London, where the theaters are so small. I mean, those theaters are so tight.
And and there's so many people.
I,
They pack them
I
in.
don't see. I just don't see how it's going to happen.
I don't either.
And it's tragic, I mean, it really upsets me so much. The arts are so much a part of my life, and traveling to see the arts in so many cities, and
Yeah.
now that's just gone for a long while, I
It is
think.
gone. And that's one of your favorite things to do, is it
It
not? I
is one of
read
my
that.
favorite things.
Traveling
Yeah,
and just seeing theater,
yeah,
and one of
everywhere.
the articles that was written about you said, you really can learn from bad work, not necessarily
Yes.
your own, but from others. And I was interviewing somebody not too long ago, and they were like, "Oh, honey, if it's not good, I get up. I can't stay." But
Yeah.
you, on the other hand, you stick it out, and part of it is because you were a critic, right?
Yes, and but I will admit, but I have left many a show myself. And especially in
Wow.
the last few years, it's gotten to the point where like intermission comes, and I think, my life is too short. I
Right.
I could be home watching the Great British Bake Off. I could be doing
Uh
a
huh.
lot more. If I'm sitting there watching a show and I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner tomorrow night,
That's not a good
mm,
sign.
or I'm sitting there blocking the show I'm working on.
For me, I start reblocking the show that I'm watching.
Yes. What would I do
Maybe,
differently here?
and I know
Yeah.
immediately, I'm like, oh, well, that was wrong.
Yeah.
I would do this
Yeah.
or I would do that. And if I start doing that, then I know it's not,
Yeah.
and Rusty said that he isn't, well, he doesn't see a lot of theater, even when theater was going
Uh-huh.
on, because
Uh-huh.
he just has no tolerance for people who aren't really living the word as they're on stage. They're not
Sure.
living the experience.
Yeah.
And he, studied under Stanislavski, and anyway, but he talks about just really buying into the moment
Yeah.
and really giving each other something to act off of, just, and he says if it's just like blah, banal commercial, he just doesn't even want to go.
Yeah. Nothing's worse than mediocre theater, or what I call Velveeta theater. I mean,
Oh,
that kind of processed,
Right.
no one's
Right.
thinking about a thing. And I will admit, though, it's interesting because there's been a few shows that I've been forced to stay because I either saw someone in the audience who knew me, and so I couldn't really sneak out, or I knew the director or whatever. And often, though, it's really weird when I've done that. The second act is much better, and I go, gee, I would have missed something good.
I read that in your
So
article that lots of times they can,
yeah,
maybe act one just wasn't really their thing and they
right,
got their rhythm, it's in act two. Um, a lot of comedies, like even Schitt's Creek, right?
sure,
Brilliant, brilliant,
brilliant.
brilliant. Um, their first 4 episodes, I mean, I watched one and went,
Hmm.
I don't think I can do this. I'm not getting it. And Jackie O'Connor, friend of yours and mine,
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
"Oh, no, no, no. You must go back and start
yeah,
and stick with it." And I have never been so glad that I
yeah.
went and watched. I mean, and if you look back at the beginning of a lot of comedies, they don't
Sure.
really know each other. They haven't really melded into having a great energy with each other. They don't really
Yeah,
know what their characters are, what their mannerisms are. And it takes them a little while. Like Will and Grace, same
sure.
thing. Their first season was, but they kind of came out of the gate,
Yeah,
fabulous. But they didn't really know, and it took them a little while, like in first gear, second gear,
yeah.
and then they start on a roll. So it's great when shows get a chance to have a long run on stage or get to do, more than one season.
The setup is often really tricky in comedies. The setup, the exposition, the build, and I think that's part of the thing when you're directing a comedy. You have to be so careful with that first act, with that first scene.
Right. Yeah.
Because
And it
yeah,
does have kind of a build. I mean, it depends on what
it
type of
does.
comedy you're doing,
Sure,
realistic or,
sure. Farce.
drawing room or farce or whatever. So, yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about working with actors.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that I said in my original, one of the reasons I wanted to do this, I wanted to talk to directors about how they work with actors, how they help them mold into characters, how they help them find their characters if that's needed,
Uh-huh.
guide them. Talk to me about an experience, if you can think of one, where you had a little bit more of a job directing an actor than you thought. And you don't have to
Uh-huh.
say the show or the actor, but
Sure.
can you think of a time where you went, this is going to be a little more work than I thought it was when I had auditions?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And so much about directing is casting.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you're always trying to cast someone that you see the seed of that human being that they're going to portray
Right.
in them, and then helping them to bring that forth. So sometimes, and most of the time, luckily, casting has been good for me. I can cast really well. There
Right.
have been rare occasions,
Uh-huh.
where, and really rare,
Right.
where it's just an actor that there is just no connection. I mean, no matter what I tried, uh, they were closed off to me, and I was closed off to them, and it
Mm-hmm.
just didn't. It didn't compute. Now, luckily, it's only happened once or twice,
Mm-hmm.
but the experience was so awful
Oh.
that, and the first time, I heard from many people not to do this, not to cast this person who I did not know.
Right.
And I thought, no, I was a young director.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh no, they'll be fine. And of course,
Oh,
it turned out to be the worst experience of
it
my
is.
life. Just the worst. I mean, it really was terrible. But most of the time, you try to find. I think the best thing that's ever been said about directing is that you're two important things: when to talk and when to shut up.
Yes.
And I think that is absolutely the truth.
Well, that's so funny. Last week when I don't know if you listened to Eva DeVirgilis, I
Oh,
did.
I didn't hear that one. Yeah.
Oh, she and I talk about Scott Wichman, who I know you know. If you've been in Richmond, Virginia, everybody knows Scott Wichman. And he did Scapino with me. And one of the things that I said to her is, I knew that when I was directing Scott, that I was going to have to just kind of raise myself up and not be scared because he's really smart and
Mhm.
he's really good. But he's a director too. So he has to work bits out himself. And
Yeah.
you have to just step back and get out of the way. And then
Yeah.
when he's finished working with the other actor, and lots of times he'll just ask them to let me just figure this out.
Right.
another actor. Let me figure out what I need to do. And then I'll just sit there and wait and watch. And then I said I would, there's one moment in particular I remember that he had to work. It was when Scapino puts the guy in the bag.
Yes.
And the guy that I was putting in, Jack Parrish, was really, really tall. And he was having a hard time bending down. And Scott was trying to work out. And I thought, how can I help this? And I said, guys, do you want to take a break? Jack, yes, out of the bag. Yes. And Scott, no. And I went, okay, let's just, Jack, can you hold just a second longer? And Scott had to just kind of run around the bag trying to figure out how to do it. And I knew that I was going to do more damage than good if I stopped him and tried to get up on stage and try to figure it out. But nope. And just let him go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And learning that patience is really important, I think, as you're working, as you're starting to work. Because it takes a lot. That's hard, you know.
Yeah,
you want to.
Yeah. I have worked with directors too that are actors first, and they have an idea of how they would do it and how they play it. And so, you know, you kind of want to go, do you want to do this for me? Because I'm not, you know.
Yeah. I try to never, ever, and now watch, you know, actors will say, oh, I do it all the time. I try to never give a line reading of any kind.
Right.
And also, I never get up on stage unless I absolutely have to just move something. But I don't feel that that's my place, you know.
Right. Now I jump up and move and go.
Never do that.
A lot of it is my energy though too, is like I try to figure it out, like, can you do this in that amount of time? Let me see how this feels, and then okay, all right, try it and see if it works. And if they have an idea, you do it. Then let me see if the, you know, so I will, and definitely if it's like a stage type of comedy, like Ken Ludwig or, you know, just anything like that is this farcical. So let me ask you another question. When you are doing, you've directed musicals and right?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Is there a difference in your script analysis from musical to play?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
In a musical, because I'm very much a musician, I play piano and I read.
Yes, you started at age 8, I believe. Yes.
Yes, I'm a real music nut. So so in a musical, I am just working first and foremost from the score, from what the music is doing, what the composer. Luckily, you know, I have never really worked on a crappy musical. And there are plenty of them. But I've been really lucky. I've worked mostly on a lot of Sondheim and Next to Normal, which is so brilliant, and My Friends, It Should Have Been You, which is a brilliant show. I don't care what anyone says.
Oh, it's a great show.
But shows that the music is very much a part of the core of the heart of the show. So all my work starts with that first.
So you start listening to do you listen to the soundtrack? Do you just play it?
I play through, I listen, and I think of how it involves the words, how it involves the lyrics, how the scenes come up out of the music, which of course in like Sondheim is just, I mean, one of the best things I've ever done, the best experiences ever was doing Sweeney Todd, which is just a miracle. I mean, every day going to that was such a joy to work on.
Yeah, Theater Lab did it here on a smaller scale.
Right,
and I have to admit, when they said they were going to do it, I thought, wow, that's kind of an undertaking for the basement, you know?
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. I thought they did it. Did you see it? Were you here in town?
The best production I've seen, well, I don't know, I've seen a lot. I saw the original too.
I did too.
My first Broadway show was Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou in the original. So,
really? Oh, I saw them both too.
Broadway.
Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou. They were
so
fantastic.
Good. Oh, and that set. But the next best production I ever saw was the little tiny one in the Pie Shop that was in London, and then they also did it in New York. And that was remarkable.
So they did it actually in a pie shop.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, they created a pie shop out of an old restaurant in London. And then they did the same thing in a really small theater space in New York. And,
how cool. You know, I don't think I knew about
amazing.
that. I know that
God,
Midtown, there's the little pie company, but I don't think you could stage something there. No.
No, this was at the Barrow Street Theater, which was a great space. But what I was going to say that's interesting, the difference is that a play I often look at as a piece of music. So I kind of structure it in my head
Right.
in terms of in terms of rhythm and into the filigree of movements and the sonata structure of a scene and
Right.
how all that works. And I never say that to actors. I mean,
Right.
but I'm thinking that.
Right. Now, you had actually, I think at one point, if you can tell me what show this was, you had a cast in particular listen to Mozart's Piano Concerto in A major.
Yes, and I can't remember which show that was.
Okay, was it?
I often show, and I do a lot of pre-work with a cast, at
Okay.
least a week, which involves reading the script many times around the table, which I really enjoy, and then moving away from the table, but still just reading. No directing at all. I don't say anything. And then lots of showing them video of different things that pertain in some way to the play. So it could be stuff about the period. It could be stuff about a historical event that the play is centered on. When I directed As You Like It up in Stratford, we watched the forest hour from Planet Earth.
Oh, nice.
Which was really interesting. It can be various things, and often music too. I will play music that I'm either going to use in the show or that influences my way of thinking.
Right.
So yeah, I like them to start with all the stuff that I did in terms of pre-work.
Interesting. And you will use some rehearsal time to do that, or just tell them to do it on their own?
Oh, no. Always as a group, because part of it is the discussion. After we watch this movie that pertains, like when I did the Stephen Dietz Dracula, we watched all of the Dracula movies. We spent 3 days watching all of them, from the 1930s, from Silence up to, present day, and discussing the use of vampires in culture, how it's changed, how our feelings have changed about vampires. So that the discussion is so much a part of learning together.
Yeah.
And then we all have that background to start in terms of our work.
And I think what you've just described is what we said a few minutes ago. I think that theater people, actors, directors, producers, designers are all missing that type of intimacy, that let's get together and listen and talk about it. And Zoom meetings are fine. They're fine for kind of, and this is great because I'm really enjoying dabbling in talking with different people, and I'm having a great time just chatting around and talking about the process, because there isn't a whole lot of that going on right now, and I just need to keep it alive in myself, right? So I was going to ask you a question, and it kind of
Zoom rehearsal, I think, is insane.
I think a Zoom rehearsal is crazy. I also think that these readings that are happening are kind of interesting. But I don't really want to. I'm going to say this. I don't really want to pay to see one. I'll donate a little something, but I don't. Theater is meant to be it's a shared experience. We're supposed to be together, and you can't get that same feeling in your home.
Yeah, you have to share the same air.
You do. You have to share the same air. Everybody comes to it, from their day at the job, or, kids, or you're tired. Friday nights were always really tired. Thursday nights were the worst when I was doing musicals. Thursday night, kind of okay. Friday night, horrible. Saturday matinee, white hair, blue, it's a blue hair. And it just was really, they weren't going to be very funny. They were going to be very quiet or fall asleep, right? And then by Saturday night, we were ready to rock and roll again. And Sunday matinees tended to be pretty good too, in musicals. So you listen to the music a lot when you're getting ready to do a musical, and the libretto, and actually listen to the music and maybe even play some for yourself on the piano. When you get a script, and let's don't bring in new works. Let's just talk about scripts that are tried and true.
Sure.
What is one of the first things that you do before you ever think about casting? What do you do with the script?
Well, I read it a number of times. I read it backwards to forwards. I like doing that. Last scene first and going backwards through it. And something I really enjoy doing is putting the script down and picking it up and just reading a scene from the middle, or a few pages from the middle.
Right.
Just completely, just jumping in the pool for a few seconds.
Right.
And sometimes you see things that you never would, see. So then I also read a lot about the author. Even if it's somebody I know really well, I'll read a bunch of biographies, especially sections about what happened while they were writing this particular piece.
Oh, how wonderful.
Then I look at anything, if it's all a different period or I've moved it to a different period, I'll really research that period, you know, everything about it. The music, the mores, the politics, the everything about it.
Okay.
So I get a real sense of the period.
Of what it felt like to be.
Yes, in that period. And I'll watch a lot of films that were either made in that period or about that period. So that I just kind of immerse, you know, and usually, I mean, happily, I'll know what I'm going to do a few months in advance so that I can do this work because it's essential to me.
It's a lot of preliminary work. And then, so you do that for yourself, and then do you like to pick your own designers, or do you?
Yeah, I really do enjoy working with design, but you know, I've worked with many different designers. So, and sometimes you can work. Often you can work great. If they're a good designer, then they're very open and want that discussion. And I see things very visually. Yeah.
You do. Yeah, so do I. And I think it's really important for a director to have an idea of the flow and tell them what your concept, you know, this at the very first meeting.
Absolutely.
This is what I'm looking for. And then come up with that production calendar and what you're looking for at what station to get you up to Tech Week, right?
And sometimes it's very detailed. Sometimes I know exactly what the space looks like. I had a really wonderful time, speaking of Richmond, doing that with Tennessee on...
Tennessee Dixon?
Yeah, on Stupid Effing Bird.
You know what, that set was amazing.
She was so much fun to work with because she totally got how I express myself, and we really understood each other, and I just loved working with her.
She's a true artist. I mean, she is, I was supposed to, I asked her to do a set for me once, but she was just too busy. She was working at Firehouse. I think she had just started working there. But I have absolutely thought that all of her sets here in Richmond have been so detailed and almost poetic in the way it looks,
very much.
The way it moves, and how it really helps create the feeling and help the actors move from space to space.
Right.
She doesn't, nothing's wasted. Everything is used.
Absolutely. And that was very much, I wanted a set that was sort of an art installation. So that was what we started with, and that's what it became. But, you know, I also loved working with, oh God, I'm blanking on this.
That's okay. In Richmond or?
Yeah, so the guy in Richmond who did It Should Have Been You, which, same space, but just a totally different use of the space.
Was it?
And
it wasn't Frankie Foster. Was it Frankie Foster?
Oh, I think it was. Yeah. Yes.
I love Frankie. Hi, Frankie. We'll get you on here too. Frankie and I went to college together.
Oh, I love him. He's a lovely guy.
And just to stop for a quick second, Frankie's, his mother, Gracie, she makes pickles and relishes. And he has the best pickle. And I said, you know what, Frankie, I need some of your pickle. And I said that, and I went, oh my God, that sounds really wrong. It's called Gracie's Garden. And he's got sweet butter pickle that is unbelievable. It is so crisp and wonderful. And I've got, Frankie, I've got one more jar left. I need it coming up. So Frankie,
next time I get to Richmond, I want those pickles.
Oh, it's so great. But anyway, yeah, we love Frankie. Yeah. And that set too, that was really good. I enjoyed both of those shows, which I got to see. And I love having freelance directors come into town because a lot of times we're just seeing each other's work. So when you have somebody come in that is as talented and as knowledgeable as you are, it's really exciting to see that work. So that was
fun. I love that space. You know, the RTP space is just kind of magical to me.
It is. For those listening that don't know, that it's Richmond Triangle Players, RTP.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. And I worked in, you know, a very different space for my first show, which was when Quill, it wasn't Quill, it was the other.
Henley?
Yeah, but it was but it was in the art museum. The first time they were back in the art museum.
Okay.
After a long time. And that vast, huge stage, that's a
What did you direct?
Space. That was Line in Winter.
Oh, I saw that too with Dave Bridgewater and Melissa. That was wonderful too.
That was so much fun with the two of them. I love it.
You know what? That space was really popular. It was in the Virginia Museum. Yeah. And it was called Theatre Virginia. And I worked there quite a bit. And they sometimes would close off the back.
Yes.
With a curtain, right? Mm-hmm, to kind of make it a little bit more intimate.
Yeah.
But that space was, I mean, I tell you what, those were the days back in the
Yeah.
1970s and 80s, man. Theater was rocking and rolling back.
Oh,
And
I bet.
it was the only equity house in town, and people would come in from all over. And I saw shows there, you know, I mean, it just one show after the other after the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was talking with somebody the other day about all the different artistic directors that they had come through there, and
Yeah.
all were just, you know, wonderful, from Terry Burglar to Bill Gregg, who I'm hoping to have on here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Tom Marcus was one that was there. George Black was there, and they were all very good. They all brought different, you know, different feelings and different directorial
Oh, sure.
concepts. You know,
Sure.
yeah.
I was going to say, you know, moving from small spaces to huge spaces is something that I really enjoy.
Yes.
Is I really love, because I've worked in every kind of space, like outdoor, gigantic, you know, thrust.
Boy, that's a
theater.
hard one. That's a really
It's
hard one.
but you can still achieve a lot, and you can always achieve truth in whatever space you're in.
Right.
So, and sometimes it's trickier.
It is.
but
I know.
you can achieve that. You know, another thing that I think of when I read a script is I break it down very much cinematically, because I think cinematically, weirdly enough, and I've only
Really?
now directed just one short film, but it's film has always meant so much to me, and I studied it ever since I was a little kid. So I tend to think of a script in terms of medium shots, close-ups, long shots, and I again would never tell an actor that.
Right.
But that's the way my mind is going, and I think creating that on stage is really exciting to me.
That's really cool. Yeah, yeah, we're going in for a push, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And in order to do that, maybe you could bring the lights could go out, and you could bring the
Sure.
spot in towards the face. I mean,
Yes.
there are ways of doing that. But I
Yes.
think you're right. I think I have always said that comedy is extremely musical in its rhythm. If
Oh,
it's
yeah.
well written, like thank you, Neil Simon, it is. I mean, you hear the ba-dum-bum. You know
course.
where it is, and you know how to build up to it. And what is, when you are auditioning these days, have you done a lot of video, people sending you video to audition? That's the thing that's
You
done.
know, yes, but you know, as I mentioned to you, I'm semi-retired. I'm not directing. I kind of went through some health stuff, and I'm kind of taking a little time not to do it. And I was doing it a lot. I directed a lot, and
Yes,
I
your
got
resume
very
is quite
tired.
amazing.
It was a lot of great work that I'm very proud of. So you know, I'm not. I don't feel bad about that. But I still enjoy it. And lately, I have had to do more video auditioning, which is fine.
Right.
In fact, one of the best performances I ever worked on with someone was the woman who played Blanche Dubois for me in Streetcar in Portland, and that was a video audition. That was
Wow.
and you know, for that huge a role, but she was just fantastic.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think you can tell a lot. You can tell a lot from a video audition. I tend to be one of those people. You can tell a lot in the first few seconds.
Oh, well, even if it's on,
So,
if it's pre-taped,
sure.
or
Yeah.
if it's, you know, you come
Makes
in the
no
room,
difference.
it's those very first, it's that they can sing, you know, like I can name that tune in 2 notes. I can name
Yeah.
whether I'm going to cast or not, 2 notes, two
Yeah.
words of a monologue, you know how they present themselves. So let's talk about the audition. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the old fashioned audition. Okay. The old fashioned before we talk about video. Within those, when you're sitting behind that table
Yeah.
and someone walks in the room, what's the first thing you want to see?
I want to see who they present themselves as.
Okay.
And if I can see, I can always tell if somebody's being false.
Yep.
I can always tell when someone's being apologetic, which I hate.
Yep. Me too.
So, but I can also tell when they're full of themselves.
Yes.
Now, and sometimes, if they're really brilliant and full of themselves, okay, I'll deal with it.
You give them a pass. If you're
I'd
really,
rather
really
not.
a diva, right? I'd rather not. But there are the more, and I talked with that, you know, about Scott. I mean, there are certain things that
Sure.
you go, well, really, sometimes the most talented people come with some of the things that you're
Yeah.
going to, as a director, you're going to have to allow that
Right.
you wouldn't normally allow, and become.
But nowadays, I mean, it's like I just want to work with people I want to work with. I want to spend that time with.
Right.
So, so that's really important. And I'm looking to see if there's something again in them that, and often because I cast very strangely sometimes. I really cast not typically or
Oh,
against type quite a
right.
bit. And it's really if they carry the soul of that person, if I get a sense that they, understand that person. I'll
Would
talk
you?
a little bit to them,
Uh-huh.
because I like to just get a sense of who they are. I also sometimes ask for things like, tell me a story about something that happened to you in your life that was similar to this incident, or the time that you were in trouble, or tell me a joke, or just anything to get away from
Right.
something that they've rehearsed.
Sure, absolutely, like La La Land.
Yeah.
The moment where she finally gets a job is when she's at
Yes.
her lowest point, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
and basically given up the career. Tell me something about it, and she goes into that beautiful song. Um, and yeah, I tend to go, like, say I was up in New York and I was going to be directing Quilters
Right.
for Wayside Theater. They're no longer, but I was up in New York, and for that show I was looking for a look. I wasn't looking for people who even look like me,
Uh-huh.
more commercial. I want women who look folky. I want
Sure.
women who look like they didn't have on a lot of makeup, or that they didn't need to do their nails, or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just wanted real rustic, real earthy looking women. And so for certain shows, I can just tell from when the door opens, and sometimes I can use my imagination, but
Yeah.
really directors now, they don't want to use their imagination. They want you to be
I
exactly
know.
what they want, right? They don't
Yeah.
want it, right? And now talk about too, it was a term that was used when I was coming out of school called eclectic casting. Now I believed it's almost called colorless casting.
Oh, right. Yeah. Colorblind
But
cast.
eclectic casting was totally putting people in roles that you would not
Yeah.
normally see, right?
Yeah.
It's more of a visual than an auditory. It's a visual eclectic casting. Like you go,
Yeah.
wow, this is not what I would think it would look like. Like using a little girl to be the narrator in Our Town, as
Right.
opposed to Hal Holbrook. Talk to me about, did you do any like eclectic casting
Oh,
or colorless
often.
casting?
Yeah, I kind of like that.
I do
I,
too.
I like just seeing whoever like came in, and kind of putting together an offbeat ensemble. I always like a bunch of people that really are a bunch of different pieces,
Yeah.
that don't look homogenous in any way. And I think I see, too much of that. It's much more interesting to me someone with edges or cragginess
Hmm.
or something different, about
Right.
definitely.
Um, did you read I asked this to Tony Cobb last week while we're speaking of um, colorless casting or whatever. Did you read that Dear White American Theater, we see you? Did you read that? That
Oh
was
gosh, I didn't. I'd love to. I have
it's
to do that.
I posted it on the Facebook page for ACT.
Okay.
And you can go to their website and take a look. There's
Right.
they have some brilliant actors put that piece together. And they've got a huge website. Before it was
Mm.
just that one letter
Yeah.
with all these bullet points. I would love to know what your thoughts are on that as a
Okay.
director. If you can read it, and then you can post on it on the
Sure.
Facebook page and let us know what you think.
Okay.
What would you do differently moving forward?
Mm.
With all this Black Lives Matter
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
trying to make things more equitable. What does that look like, and how do we do it? We
Right.
can't beat
Right.
ourselves up about what we did in the past, but we certainly can make changes moving forward.
Of course.
So if you don't mind reading that, I'd love to know what your thoughts
Sure.
are.
Of course.
All right, let's talk about that glass menagerie that you were interviewed in, and you said you had gone to Toronto and you saw a brilliant glass menagerie that was the prettiest, simplest production you'd ever seen. You said it was simple and direct, and there were no tricks and no directional masturbation, is what you said. I hate seeing actors do that, right?
Yeah.
But first of all, let's talk about what exactly does directorial masturbation look like?
Oh, I think we've all seen it. Um, you know, uh, it comes in many forms, and
Yes, it does.
it is often for me, it's basically when a choice has been made, and it's often a strong choice, and we love strong choices, but it's a choice that is not, it is just not organic to what is in the play.
Right, it doesn't serve the play. It's more of this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
and it, hell or high water, this is my vision and I'm going to make it work. And you're
Yes.
trying to fit, a square into a round hole, and you're going, it's not working, it's not
Right.
working, and yet they're fighting it and they're working against it. So yeah.
And I often, because I have done a decent amount of Shakespeare and classical plays, and I've often changed the period on them, which many directors do. That's what people do, especially in the 20th century. But I always try so hard, if I'm going to do that, to make sure that every single detail of that play is going to work within the concept of the period.
Right.
And so often that, I have seen so much regional theater and so much theater every place, and a lot of it sometimes is, it goes as far as the costume designs, and that's it. They haven't given any thought.
Right. Too much thought or not enough thought.
Not enough thought. And so that kind of drives me crazy. So that's masturbatory. Also, in terms of, well, it's such a thin line of pushing something too far to the point where the play is in trouble of getting lost within the histrionics of either the director or the designer, because designers can certainly do that.
Oh, yeah.
And using Glass Menagerie, because that production, which was a beautiful, beautiful production at a very fine theater in Toronto that I saw it at, was so simple. Absolutely, there was almost no set. It was like the fire escape stairs and the kitchen table, and that was it. Very small space, and four brilliant actors who just said the words truthfully and felt them deeply. And there wasn't a lot of filigree. Now, I have to admit that I also loved a production of Glass Menagerie that was in New York that many people definitely accused the director, Sam Gold.
Sally Field, was that the
Yes.
one? Yes.
Of masturbatory directing.
Not serving the play.
Did not work for me. I thought it was one of the most heartbreaking accounts of that play I'd ever seen also.
What made it so heartbreaking? I mean, it already is anyway, but what part of it? Was it Tom? Was it
No, there was
Laura?
a lot.
Was it? Oh.
Well, first of all, I'll try to just say it quickly, but Tom was brilliantly played by John Mantello, who's just an amazing actor.
Yes, and director too.
Yes, and director, absolutely. Sally Field was just so beautifully heartfelt. But what they had done was they cast an actress who was a paraplegic, who literally could not walk.
Okay.
I mean, she would have to be lifted out of her wheelchair or really crawl. And at the very beginning, they brought in the wheelchair to the steps at the front of the stage, and she had to crawl up the steps to the stage and be carried back into the wheelchair. But she was an actress. She had done many things. She was a member of this group that they were all different forms of what you would call a disability, I suppose. But some of them were blind, some deaf, some could not walk. So
Did she worked with Deaf West Theater Company?
No, this was a different company. This was a company that just does work with people with
certain types of disabilities or challenges.
So it wasn't like they went out and found a girl. I mean, she had been acting for a long while.
Sure.
And just so beautiful. So
I've got to look up her name.
Angel.
Yeah.
But it was remarkable the way they used her in this performance. Things like the fact that in the scene with the gentleman caller, which was played all on the floor, she never got up, and he danced with her just by holding her arms on the floor. But it was all in the light of two of the candles. So you didn't see the rest of her body, and it was all about her face. And she was so beautiful and luminous in the candlelight. And it was very powerful.
Wow.
And at the end, when she was in her wheelchair, and Sally Field, as she had done earlier in the play, the daughter, Laura, had crawled to Amanda.
Oh,
but
Lord.
at this point, Amanda crawled to her and put her head in Laura's lap. And
I'm trying to see what her name is.
Yeah, it was an unusual name, if I remember correctly. Kind of
Madison Ferris.
That's it. Yeah.
Madison Ferris.
But all four of them were remarkable. It was a very interesting production. It was done with no set. It was an open, like our town, to the back of the theater, and they used just a few little pieces. but I loved that production, and it was in many ways the antithesis of the one in Stratford,
Right.
which only shows, but then I've seen a lot of really terrible glass menageries. I mean, that is a play that gets done to death. And I'm not talking amateur productions. I'm talking
No.
professional productions that
Yeah.
just, oh my God.
Well, I tell you what, man, it can go on and on and on. And that's with these, even Tennessee Williams is, at this point, very wordy for who we are now in our society. We want to keep things moving, right? My daughter looks at Instagram and, flips through that phone faster than anything. And we just see images flying by our head so much and our eyes that we're not ready to sit for Ibsen anymore. I don't think we really
Sadly.
have. I don't think that we have the generations as they come up. Chekhov, Ibsen. I'm not a big Ibsen fan anyway. But Shaw, love Shaw.
Good. He's really good.
But he's good. But I think it was just because I saw Ghost and it was so bad. It was so bad. I was in college and it just went on and on. I had to see it. And I remember being so tired. All right. So you do a lot of, you were an associate artistic director, right? And not just freelancing. You got to do something that a lot of directors don't get to do and that you like to do. You called it pairing, putting together two shows. And we talked about this the other day. I said, what would be a good one would be if you could do Madame Butterfly and M. Butterfly.
Sure, of course.
Right? What pairings have worked for you in the past? And is there one that or two shows that you've not had a chance to do in Repertory?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. At Artist Rep, it wasn't so much pairing as creating the season with the artistic director.
Absolutely.
So getting things so that the pace and rhythm and reflections in the season is really cool.
Right.
And there we did do this great Chekhov project that I initiated that I just loved, which was doing the 4 great Chekhov plays in world premiere new adaptations of them.
Right, and you had some amazing writers on those
wonderful, too. Wonderful writers.
Let me just say who they are. You had Tracey Letts, who did Three Sisters. Joseph Fisher did The Seagull. Duchess of Malfi was also Joseph Fisher. And then Cherry Orchard was done by Richard Kramer.
Right, and a wonderful playwright from Canada, we did Uncle Vanya. And I blanking on his name right now, it'll come to me. So that was different. But in terms of an exact pairing, 2 of those that I did that I really enjoyed were the Children's Hour. This was not an Artist Rep, this was another theater in town. And that was Boys in the Band and Children's Hour.
Wow.
2 seminal pieces of gay theater.
Right.
That, I always kind of liked Children's Hour until I directed it. And then I realized, oh my God, she really created something amazing back in 1932 or early 30s. I mean,
way before its time.
Oh, tremendously before its time.
You know what show I always pair with that in my head when I'm talking? The Crucible.
Sure. Very similar.
Because if you wanted to do it and talk about the damage that teenagers and youngsters can do and ruin adults that really,
That's a great pairing.
Thank you,
really
darling.
We'll have to do that.
We'll have to do it. I'll direct one. You can direct the other.
And
listening.
If anybody's listening and wants to hire us, please.
We'll take
and then Boys in the Band, it's fascinating to do that play. And that play we did it was 2 different spaces, both very intimate, but the Boys in the Band we did in an actual apartment. So the audience was just literally sitting up against the walls in between the furniture and watching that happen in all the different rooms, off to the kitchen, the hallways, upstairs, the porch, but just all of that. That was really
Did the audience have to move to different rooms to see?
No, they stayed there. They were stuck. They could not leave. They could not go to the bathroom. There was no intermission. It was,
wow.
And perhaps the most interesting thing at the end was the last moment in the play, Michael says to Donald, turn the lights off when you go, would you? And so Donald sits there and he gets up and he gets his coat and he turns the lights off and goes out the front door, and the audience just sat there in the dark. And I just waited. I made them wait about a minute or 2 before the stage manager came out and said, the performance is over, you can leave now.
Oh, you're such a manipulator. I love it. That is so great.
But that silence and feeling the tension in the room of those people sitting there in the dark not really knowing what was going to happen now
Uh-huh.
was great.
Was
That
somebody
was
going to
really
come in
great.
and turn the light on? Was it not over yet? You left them hanging.
Yeah,
And that's what we're talking about. You have to be in the room together. You have to
exactly.
breathe the same air, I think is what you said a
You
few minutes ago.
do.
You have to. It's crucial. And I just, for the life of me, I know there are visionaries out there that are figuring out where we're going to go from here, right?
Yeah.
I know they're out there. And those of you that are out there doing it, bless your hearts and keep it going. And I sit there going, God, I wish I could figure out how we would do it. You know, how's it going to happen? I thought maybe the public, Central Park, I thought they might even be able to do the show out there.
Yeah, that's a big space. But also,
Uh-huh.
I firmly, firmly, firmly believe theater has been on life support system. The glorious invalid has been on an IV forever. And
Yes.
there will be a vaccine. This will end, and people will be back in the theater, and we will be back having those experiences. I mean, there's just no way that something that started with the caveman is going to get killed. I mean,
No, I mean, immediately people were trying to figure out what they were
yeah,
doing. And I know a lot of people, playwrights, are doing 5-minute plays and hiring
sure,
stars to do these, readings. And I think, give an actor a platform,
yeah,
give a director a script, and you've got a play. I mean, people are wanting to do it.
yes,
And I think the longer this goes on, the more
yeah,
it's stretched out, the more people will be just chomping at the bit. And maybe it will be good that people haven't had a chance to see theater.
yeah.
And they'll want to go see it. But I think they did a poll just recently. One of my friends who lives in New York and does Broadway said, people aren't really ready to go into a theater again.
No. I don't think it
not.
will be for another year. I mean, they've listed, they've put out opening dates for like the Hugh Jackman Music Man and a few things that are coming up, in Broadway. And I don't know if those dates are actually going to happen.
I
They're
don't
not
either.
until next summer. But and it's not just theater too. It's so much opera and
Dance.
symphony and the dance and ballet. I mean, those are things also that's going to take a long time, but they will come back. They've lasted a while.
They will. We'll have to figure out how that is. And boy, I'm waiting to figure out how that's going to happen too. I know
Me too.
that I'm interviewing Nathaniel Shaw from Virginia Rep.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
lovely guy.
I think we're doing it on July 26th. Hi, Nathaniel. And so he wanted to wait until the end of July to kind of figure out what their plan was so that he could
Sure.
kind of share it. And he said, and I may not have any news to tell, but
Yeah.
let's wait to the end of July, to figure it out. Talk to me about being a London, New York music correspondent from 1984 to present. Talk to me about
Yes.
that.
Well, that's maybe one of the greatest joys of my life, I'm sure. I started going to theater, as I said, very young. My parents made it possible that I could see everything in LA when I was growing up. And then I started going to New York when I was about 17, I think. Never missed a season. I saw everything I could, everything. And then I started going to London when I was about 21, maybe.
Okay.
And I never missed a season there. And so it's a part of my life, and I think it's an invaluable part of my life to see theater performed by so many different people and see so many of the same plays over and over.
Yeah.
Because, especially London does all those classic plays.
I know.
I've seen like 3 Ghosts, but
No, I can't.
yes, and one of them was stunning.
Oh, you know what? Another one too was a midnight. What is it?
Long Day's Journey into
Long
Night.
Day's Journey into Night. I call it Long Day's Journey into
Oh.
Hell. Oh
In
my
a bad
God.
production, but in a great production.
I
one
saw
of
the
most
Broadway
amazing.
one.
One,
Ryan Dennehy, and
but
Philip
even
Seymour
that,
Hoffman.
Philip Seymour Hoffman was brilliant in that.
He was really good, but he was playing a heroin
great.
addict.
Yeah.
I mean, he was amazing, and then it was hard to kind of think of him doing it again when you realize that he really did have a problem.
Of course.
But that was an amazing show, cast-wise.
Right.
But God, you want to talk about actor masturbation? It
It's
went
very
on and on and on.
Yes,
And I'm like, for
yes.
God's sake, get on with it. You know?
You should watch the film. The Sidney Lumet film is cut down. The play is cut to about 2 hours and 15 minutes of a 4.5 hour, and it's really good. I mean, Katharine Hepburn Ralph Richardson, Dean Stockwell, and Jason Robards are pretty damn
You know what?
good.
That's amazing. I will. I'll look into that because right now is the
Kate,
time for movies.
it's one of the
Yeah,
best Katharine Hepburn performances ever.
I
She's
loved her.
unbelievable.
Oh, I
Unbelievable. But
loved her.
her Mary Tyrone is something else. But anyway, and I was also seeing a great deal of opera and ballet at the same time. I mean, I love classical
Hmm.
work. And all of that, just goes in the computer. I mean,
Hmm.
it made for such fertile ground to grow out of, that I was influenced by a million things.
And you
And
started before you even went to college. You went to Cal State for undergrad and for
yeah,
grad, right?
yeah,
And you went early and you finished early.
yeah,
You started reviewing when you were in high school. I think you said
I did.
1976.
Yes,
Did you
I
make a lot of
graduated.
friends or make a lot of enemies with that?
Well, I don't think anybody read it. I mean, I think there was a way for them, for the editor, to fill up the pages. Because, I mean, who the hell cares what my 10 best films of the year were? Um,
You're
uh,
so
uh, uh,
funny.
but it was fun. It gave me a place to write. And it gave me and when you're writing, and I think criticism is very, very important, especially if it comes from someone who really knows their
Who's
subject.
knowledgeable, right?
And of course, I was always writing from someone who had seen a lot, to the point, even by the time I started writing in college, I had already
Right.
seen a lot. I kind of had a reason for an opinion, even though it was just an opinion.
Right, sure.
And it certainly helped as the years went by. I made it a point never to review work in in the town that I worked in.
Oh, smart man,
Never,
smart man,
ever, never,
smart
ever.
man. Never,
Uh,
never.
I actually really wrote about only Los Angeles, New York, and London. I kept it to and then in later years, I went to Stratford and Toronto quite a bit. So,
Well,
and I still write. I still post things in my Facebook. I'll have to send you actually
oh,
some. I was
send
thinking
me,
about it. There's
please
some really
do.
funny ones. There's some
Oh,
really
please do. Please send me that.
um,
That
so yeah, so I still do it because I find it very it's very helpful to put down on paper your thoughts about something.
hmm Um, I have two more things that I want to ask
Okay.
about directing. Do you have a book that was influential in your directing?
Oh,
Anything like I remember Essential Theater, Directors on Directing.
I enjoyed directors on directing. I enjoyed Harold Clurman's book
Yes.
on directing, very good. And but not really.
Hmm.
I think that acting you can sort of teach and coach.
Yes,
I think directing is almost impossible.
I do too.
I didn't learn anything in a directing class. I learned from watching,
Mhm.
from watching all the arts, because you learn stuff from dance and opera and musical
Right.
and everything. And I learned from doing. I mean, it's one of those things.
Well, I had a
That,
really good directing teacher. He was the head of
yeah,
the graduate directing program, and he saw early on that I was a director. He said, "You're an actress, but you are a director." So he
right.
would have me come in and watch rehearsals, and
Ah,
he
ah,
really touted
yes.
me as a director. He was like, kind of, became my mentor, Dr. Kenneth Campbell from VCU,
Oh,
and he is how I got my first job, my first professional job. Somebody called him and said, "We're looking for a director," and he went, "I know exactly who you should have." I was fresh out of college. It was that
great.
summer. And so he was brilliant
Yeah,
director. He created pictures. He loved getting to the nitty gritty of the
yeah.
scene. He loved John Guare. He loved it all. He took us to New York, and I did have someone that I could
That's
watch that I
wonderful.
thought was
Oh,
wonderful.
and I had some mentors in college. I had some
Mhm.
brilliant teachers. They just weren't
Right,
my directing teacher, but who was a lovely guy. But I did have two or three really brilliant mentors,
right.
including one who was my acting teacher and drama history, and she was incredible. I mean, she was really my mentor.
Yeah, I had a lot. I mean, we had great teachers there, but Kenneth was in charge of the directing program. And so
Sure.
I really kind of did a
Yeah, that's
double
great.
major. I went in as an actress. And I
Yeah.
actually, one of the other professors there they've both passed away now, Jim Parker. And I remember him
Uh,
coming up to me. I was a sophomore into my sophomore year, going into my junior year. And he came up to me at the elevator in the Raymond Hodges Theater. And he said, no one's going to take you seriously as an actress if you continue to do all this directing.
mm,
And I thought, Well, that's not very nice.
That's an interesting comment.
I think it was him. I think he wasn't taking me seriously as an actress
Right.
because I was so much under the tutelage of Dr. Kenneth Campbell that I really wasn't. I mean, I was a good actress and I was focusing on that.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And I was there to get, but then I thought, you know what it did? It made me want to direct more.
Of course.
Because I thought it was belittling. I thought it was,
Sure.
and
It
I
is
thought
belittling.
for to say that to a young,
Yeah,
student,
yeah.
I thought, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to go for this now because it was just like, you have no business directing. You really need to be focusing on your acting.
Right.
Whatever, you know, but that's really what kind of catapulted me more. And I remember telling Kenneth that he had said that to me and he went, oh, Jesus. I won't say what he really said about it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Right. Oh, you can imagine. So if you then were to, Jon Kretzu, were to write a book on directing, what would one of the chapters be? What do you think you would focus on the most if you had to write a book on directing?
You know, if I had to, at gunpoint, be forced into this position.
Right? It's make believe, John. It's not real.
Okay. I would do a book about how to prepare.
Yes.
Because that is not talked about a lot.
No.
There are lots of books about working with actors, scene work, scene study, taking apart a scene, all of that. But how you get to be ready to do a script,
right,
I think is a really important part of it. And maybe casting too, but all the prep work, a book that takes you up to the first rehearsal.
Right, exactly. I think I would probably include, how to talk to designers.
Oh, of course, yes. Yeah, all that preparatory work.
Yeah, how to talk to designers. I mean, casting actors and working with actors is kind of the fun part. It's all that prep work that needs to take place. And, a lot of directors talk about, blocking and creating pictures. And I think that's important too, given certain, in tableaus that end a scene and things that bring, pictures that bring up a scene and all of that. But really knowing how to be a jack of all trades when you're directing. You need to know about sound. You need to know about lighting. You need to be able to talk the talk. You need to be able to talk the talk like you are a lighting designer, like you are a set designer, because you've got to speak their lingo and everything in costumes. You have to know how to do that, right?
Absolutely.
So that, I think I would probably write a chapter on that. So is there any, I know you said you're watching a lot of movies and and we're trying to figure out how theater's going to happen again. How long are you in California? Were you heading back to the beautiful Pacific Northwest?
A few weeks, and then I'll probably go back up in August. I'm thinking I'd love to go down to LA. I have so many friends there I'd love to see, and a relative, I have an uncle I'd like to see, but it's LA is really dangerous right now.
And you know what, and I'm just going to say this, being halfway in the health profession too, you need to be really careful, not going and putting yourself in harm's way. People that have chemo, people that have, anybody that has diabetes or high blood pressure or any of those things.
I have all of those things.
So, I got high cholesterol and high blood pressure, but, and I have type A. They're saying now blood type.
Yes. I haven't. Yeah.
O's are the ones that are the least likely to get coronavirus. A's are the most likely to get it.
I forget what my type is.
I'm A positive.
Check that out. Oh, and I'm a diabetic. What's the?
You have diabetes, and so is it type 1, type 2? Type 2. And those are all what you and I have are called. Actually, I'm married to a doctor. It's called a comorbidity. That's a horrible way to say it. When I was pregnant, it was called a geriatric pregnancy, and I was like, you are never allowed to call it that again. Not unless you want to draw back a nub. So, comorbidity, my ass. But there are people who, if you get it, you are more.
I know.
Not being so. You might want to not visit this year and maybe next year.
Be careful. I know.
Yeah, I think just.
But it's been, I spent. I loved a lot of the time. Being an only child was great training for this. I like my company, so that's fine. And I've had a wonderful time cooking like crazy. I love cooking.
Oh, I remember Jackie telling me.
Jackie will tell you, yes. And so that's been fun. And going back to my library of all the books and CDs, music I haven't heard in years, and all of the Blu-rays and DVDs I've got. So going back and looking at that stuff and having the time to do that.
And time to not feel guilty about doing it. That's what I love, is that you don't have to do guilt, because everybody's in the same boat. And you go, well, what is everybody else doing?
There is no work.
No. So you go, I don't have to feel guilty about this. I'm actually watching a lot of TV right now. We're watching Billions. Billions is wonderful. I love Succession, Billions. We watched Mrs. America. I watched Grace and Frankie. I binge watched Schitt's Creek. It's just been a great time for watching some really good television. And I love the little comedies that are like little nuggets, comedy nuggets. And you can do like 4 in a 2-hour stance.
Yes.
It's perfect. But yeah, so tell me, if you were not, I always end with this too, if you were not as talented and brilliant and director extraordinaire that you are, darling, what do you think Jon might have done? I know very early on, you at age 4, you knew you wanted to do that. But is there ever anything else that you go, I would like to have been one of those?
Well, at age 4, I also wanted to be a fireman, which obviously was not going to happen. I think I just liked the drama, the red, the red truck, the outfit. What I seriously wanted to be, other than a conductor. Would have loved to be a symphony conductor. That would have been thrilling.
Do you ever pretend in your living room that you are?
I have at times, but more I love watching conductors. And I love watching, I'm just in the middle of watching the complete Mahler Symphony DVDs with Bernstein.
Yeah, I was going to say Leonard Bernstein.
And I've got the, conductor's score, and I love watching. And when I would go to review the symphony, I would take the scores with me and check them out of the library and watch along just to see what he's doing. And I love watching certain conductors conduct. So that is a dream job. And the only other thing I've ever thought of being was an analyst, which I think would have been...
Financial analyst?
No.
An analyst?
A psychiatrist analyst.
Oh, a psychiatrist. Oh, you mean, a psychiatrist. Wow, how cool is that? Well, you get to kind of do all of that as a director.
I do, because conducting is very much in my head when I'm directing. I would never conduct anyone, but in my head, that's what I'm doing. And analyzing characters.
And body language and all that. You kind of get to do all of it. Now, you're only not able to be, if you wanted to go to rehearsal in a fireman outfit, then you could really kind of get them all in there. But
or bring a Dalmatian to work, So
bring a Dalmatian and put a fireman hat on him.
Yeah.
Well, Jon, this has been great. I just loved this conversation, and I wish you the best. On where you are right now in this beautiful, what's the city you're in again now? Little town.
I'm in El Sobrante, California.
That just sounds El Sobrante. That just sounds so chic. Enjoy your time there, and then did you drive or fly?
I'm terrified of flying right now. I flew like crazy. I used to fly all the time, but flying right now seems...
Yeah, I posted that the other day.
Horrible.
It seems horrible. I already don't like to fly, and going to an airport with all the masks and the lines and people being distanced and all that. I'm like, you would have to drag me, kicking and screaming into an airport right now. I don't think, because it's meant to be enjoyed. It's not just meant to get you from place to place. I think travel and air travel should be really shishi and fun. And they've taken all that almost ever since 9/11. The fun part of it has kind of gone away. But I do it. So you drive. So you drove. I drove,
and I drive a lot, but flying I do a lot too, but it's become so terrible before COVID. I mean, flying became really awful the last few years. It's gotten so crowded. It's terrible.
You're right. It is. It's terrible. It's not very fun.
No.
But I wish you the best. I'm sure it's going to be a very scenic drive back.
It will be lovely.
And I hope we get you back here soon, too.
I hope so, too, because I love Richmond. It's just a lovely city. And
Richmond loves you, and I hope that I get a chance to work with you sometime.
That would be fabulous.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I'd love to work with you. And we can also do that pairing.
That's true. That's a good pairing.
Children's Hour in the Crucible. There you go.
I love that. That's very good.
You can borrow it.
Stay very safe and well, and really everybody in your family, just, stay well.
I will, and you too. And thank you so much. And so I think we're going to call this an interview. And thank you.
Bye.
Well, I think that about does it for this week's podcast. I can't thank you enough for listening. Remember, you can find me on Facebook under ACT and on Instagram and Twitter under ActingPod. Or you can visit my website at www.dawnwestbrook.com and ask questions, give suggestions, and feedback. But for now, as W.C. Fields once said, a man's got to believe in something. So, my noble artist and my happy troupe of theater trolls, I do believe I shall have another drink. May the footlights burn bright and your interactions, both on stage and off, be rewarding. Thanks for joining me. I'm Dawn Westbrook, your host, and this is ACT. This week's podcast is sponsored by the Martha Hill Newell Playwrights Fund.